Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast. I'm your host, Neil C. Hughes, and today we're taking on a very, very hot topic. A topic that's right at the heart of the AI revolution. That's right, I'm talking about bias. Because as AI continues to permeate every aspect of our life, from business to personal interactions to what we watch, what we listen to, it's vital that we ensure that its deployment is fair and equitable. So today I've invited my good friend Ravi back onto the podcast. He's the CTO of Couchbase, and they're deeply involved in this conversation. So as we witness giants like Microsoft and Google vying for AI supremacy, Ravi believes that it's crucial that we address and remove inherent bias from our AI systems. And I don't think there's anybody that's going to disagree with that. So today we're going to talk about the need for AI to be a almost paragon of virtue, especially considering 36% of enterprises are reporting negative impacts due to AI bias. I want to dive into the consequences of these biases, from financial and legal implications to reputational damage. And yes, I am an ex-IT guy, so this kind of stuff really excites me. But to liven it up, we'll also explore the idea of having guardians for AI to prevent bias, and also the importance of data scientists in this role. And even maybe touch on the concept of enabling a constellation for AI to ensure that it can connect the dots and help everyone see the bigger picture and avoid those limited perspectives that fuel bias. It's an enlightening conversation and a huge topic right now. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to California, where Ravi's going to talk about all this and much more. So a massive warm welcome back to the show. Can you tell the listeners who maybe missed our first conversation a little about who you are and what you do?
Thanks for having me here, Neil. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Ravi Mayuram, I'm the CTO here at Couchbase. We build a next generation database here and been here a while now in this journey of modernizing databases.
One of the things that always amuses me is that 7-8 months ago, there was lots of futurists talking about what trends will dominate the 2023, but not many people picked up on Gen AI. And of course, nobody was talking about it 7 months ago, but now it's all anybody's talking about. So I've got to ask, what are your thoughts around the speed of technological change and just how much things like generative AI has just entered the mainstream?
Yeah, it's a very good question. This is the hot topic, and for a good reason. We have been at this AI game for almost 60 years. I think one of the first ones were in the late 50s. So, but this has been a tipping point here in terms of how you could put to sort of commercial and practical use all those years of research and development, and the ecosystem has come to a point where it has become a general conversation around generative power of AI. And this is something that was a little bit, I think, triggered by the release of ChatGPTs and other the AI models, the large language models that have come about. And they do have the power to go shift the landscape permanently in the future in a good way. Of course, this will cause disruption in certain areas, etc. But in a good way, this is going to take us forward in terms of how machines can be put further to use to simplify a lot of the complex stuff that we are not able to tackle just as humans.
And one of the reasons that I was excited to get you back on the podcast was to maybe delve into some of the specific instances, like the bias exhibited by ChatGPT or Amazon's AI in hiring practices or Bard's impact on Google's share price. There's so many big talking points around this, but I'm curious, what are the big takeaways from these incidents and that focus on wanting to be more responsible around the use of AI?
Very true. It's almost like, how you train a little kid to ride a bike. Yeah. The kid doesn't have the balance, that's going to fall. So you just have to run after it and make sure that the bike doesn't keel over. And AI is a little bit like that. You just can't say, you can be so protective and say, cannot do anything because you're going to fall and scratch yourself. But at the same time, you just can't let this just run by itself, because it's going to get hurt at a certain level in one sense. So in that combination is where we need to sort of be both futuristic as well as cautious at the same time. As in, like, we need to let the AI generative capabilities to come out, and yet at the same time be sensible and have the right sort of mindset around it to put the guardrails. And those examples that you cited, that we have all seen, will become the poster child to an extent of what can go wrong with the AI. But you have to, just like that kid example, the only way direction for this one to go is to grow up. So that's where you need to have trust and ensure that the adulthood of this nascent capabilities of AI is let to grow, but at the same time have the right side of governance and policies and oversight, I would say, instead of calling all these other things, so that we are being careful about what we're unleashing.
And as someone that must be speaking with business leaders from all around the world, I'm curious, from those conversations, what are some of the financial, legal and reputational ramifications that they might be wary of, especially when enterprises are impacted by AI bias? And how severe can these consequences be? Are these conversations that you're having more and more now?
Absolutely. Because everybody knows that if you do not take advantage of these, you will get left behind in the digital divide, so to say. Yeah. But at the same time, if you use it the incorrect way or without the right level of oversight, this can lead to this sort of legal, reputational, and simple, straightforward business issues from which it will be difficult to recover these business, the reputation, and any other sort of legal ramifications that comes out of it. Simple stuff like, if you use stuff like ChatGPT, be careful in what sort of data you're sort of, both when you're using it, you're contributing data as well to it, and as well as using that data to make judgment that is coming out of these. Both are at a questionable state right now, as in, like, people willy-nilly share internal information from companies, which gets exposed, and that creates one type of problem. The other is you're basing some of your recommendations, if you will, on data that is someone else's property and proprietary stuff. And both these are sort of, this is where the legal angle of it comes. AI currently, as you know, the technical term they use is it hallucinates, as in it believes a little too much in itself. So instead of saying that I don't know, it manufactures stuff, and that lies the real crux of the matter. It cannot tell you if there are people who have done this experiment. Maybe every day it's changing, so it may be different. That if it asks ChatGPT or any one of these to quote Shakespeare, it may not exactly be able to quote Shakespeare, but it will manufacture stuff that is very reminiscent of what Shakespeare actually said. Just to give you an example of the kind of hallucination it actually does. So now, near approximation is not actually fact, and in that lies the rest of the problem of how people use these kind of near facts or hallucinations to form their own opinion and judgment, and that's a very tricky area. And so there's got to be sort of people who are experts need to sort of watch over this and say, is that really correct, what we are getting out of using some of these large language models? And so that's where the businesses are concerned, because reputational risks come out of this if you start to use this technology to come to wrong conclusions, which may impact their customer base in a negative way, or if the customer base reacts negatively to something that they come out with. So those are the couple of areas that many of the business execs are quite concerned about how to use this technology. Because fundamentally, if you see some of these language models are all sort of the data that they've consumed is what's available freely in the internet. And the quality of that data is not the best of humanity. It's got all kinds of bias all over the place. And that is the general topic that everybody's grappling with. Everybody knows that we have to make progress, but at the same time, paying careful attention to that data set and the unbiased nature of the data set, or as little bias as is possible, because humans are fundamentally biased, and so we are going to look at everything with a certain bias. But there are a lot of data set oriented biases that AI models exhibit. That's the only area where we can go and tackle and make the systems that much better and more reliable.
And it's such an important topic right now, and I can almost feel the head nods of business leaders all around the world. I think that your words will resonate with so many, and there's been so many changes in recent years. If I look back to my IT days, IT was always regarded as the guardians of the corporate network. But here in 2023, I've got to ask, what does it mean to be the guardian of the AI galaxy? Can you elaborate on some of the roles and responsibilities of data scientists in that context, particularly when it comes to mitigating bias?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the fundamental border on which this whole AI actually operates on is data and the computing on top of that data. So the more and more there is inspection, there is scrutiny, and there is sort of emphasis on the quality of data, the better the generative systems are going to become. And that's why all the guardians of the galaxy, as you put, the work begins there. This is where data scientists, the various leaders in the organization, and academia and even government all have to come together, because the only way we're going to solve this problem is, having more eyeballs on it. Because we know fundamentally that we are biased. And how do we remove bias is basically by having more people inspected and have a free dialogue around the various limitations that we have ourselves, knowing that self-awareness is what makes us correct and get to the next level. And the same thing needs to be brought to this field of data, the data governance and the data exchange and data, the scientists who are working on this data, they need to have, number one, we need to make sure that the higher ethical standards are sort of followed here, and they enforce that throughout the ecosystem. And in that process, there needs to be open sharing of data. I mean, just like the way, the example I use is how we tackled COVID. It's when academia and industry from across the countries, various countries, came together to gang tackle the problem in one sense. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had the vaccines in the short amount of time. Similar approach has to be taken here, and organizations can start within themselves first. There's a lot of departmental data that is sort of not moving. There are a lot of data silos. So when you bring those together, you'll start to understand and see patterns, and and then exchanging some of this data, whatever is exchangeable, with the right level of, again, governance over it, not to exchange personal information or information you collected out of context in some of these models. And so you just have to bring the various data sets. The bigger the data, I mean, in AI, we always used to say, more data and simple algorithm any day beats a small data set and a very sophisticated algorithm. That's what this is basically proving. More and more data you have, the less and less bias we will have, and the sort of intelligence you derive out of that will be that much more powerful and correct and relevant, and not lead you in the wrong direction of bias and misinformation.
And so far this year, I've been to 4 big tech conferences over in the USA, and I've seen keynotes from most of the big tech companies, all claiming, of course, to be ahead of the curve around Gen AI. It's almost become a bit of a cliche, but my big takeaway is that it's out the box now. It's not going back. So
yes.
With that in mind, for business leaders listening, what ethical practices should organizations be adopting, especially when collecting and cleansing their data, to ensure fair and representative decision-making by AI algorithms? Because it's something that every business is going to have to go after, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think business leaders, they control, in one sense, this is a way bigger problem at a certain level than what individual business leaders can solve within their own domain. First, they need to understand that.
Yeah.
Many of the sort of academicians and people who have been thinking about AI for long would tell you that they don't know the answer, which doesn't mean they haven't thought deeply about it. This is that big. This, like I said, the cat is out of the bag, and where is it going to go? If anybody says we know exactly where it is going to go, run away from those people. Nobody knows. Yeah. So in that regard, the business leaders need to be careful in terms of who they listen to, in terms of how they form their opinions. But there are fundamental sort of things that they can always sort of take charge, which is first, get the data of your organization in order. It is not. It's so fragmented in so many silos within your own organization. There is enough data, and if you use some of these AI models, you can derive good intelligence. But that intelligence will be sort of limited because you need to have this data then be working with the global set of data from where you, in your domain. It doesn't have to be shared with everyone, but the more open it is, the more eyeballs and more it goes through the rigors of how people train in those. That's where the value is. And so they need to then ensure that like you mentioned, the data is appropriately cleansed, and then the right types of data is then shared so that there's more eyeballs on those, and the intelligence you derive out of that comes to your own value. So first is get your data inside the organizations in a manner that it is actually consumable, workable, and where you can derive intelligence out of these large language models, and further innovation that is going to come. It's a Cambrian explosion of sorts that's happening. In the last 3 months, the amount of advance this whole area has had is mind-boggling, to the extent that now people are thinking it is not just the big ones. The open source model of AI is going to sort of overtake many of these developments which are considered proprietary at this point. So there's a lot to come. This is just the first generation of it, so getting your data in order, getting your governance in order, so that the data that you're actually going to be both sharing with the AI models and working externally with are the right ones. There's a lot of work to be done here in terms of cleansing. Those would be the two things, and sort of bringing the different data silos together. Even though we say this in one sentence, it's a journey. It's going to take years and years, because the last 40 years we've also known to collect data. Every organization doesn't throw away any piece of data, so it's like all data is collected in triplicates and stored someplace, but they're all silos. So first thing is to break those silos and bring them together. Make data flow is what I say. Currently data is sitting like bricks in various places. Just make it a little bit more liquid so that it can flow between systems. That will be the first place where they have to invest a lot of time and energy, and then of course the security and governance elements of it. Naturally, this is all preparation, so when you have your AI algorithms and models applied to it, you actually get the benefit of it.
And of course, the belts and braces approach to IT and service delivery is always using processes such as change management and considering the future implication of anything before it's even implemented. But also, I think over the last 15 years, by contrast, we've seen what happens when big tech doesn't do that and have that motto of move fast and break things. And thankfully, we are going back to a more cautious approach. But how do you think we can ensure that AI systems are destined to see that bigger picture and avoid limited perspectives that fuel bias? And are there any strategies you can share or methods around how to achieve this? I realise there isn't just one big fix or one button you can push to do all that stuff, but is there anything you can share?
Yeah, I think we are going to learn a lot in this area, but I think fundamentally, you basically have to, it's almost like trust but verify situation. Yeah. You just have to trust to an extent that this is going to take you to a better place, and this is going to be the way that we are going to operate, because this has got to be the way, because the amount of data that we're dealing with, humans cannot make sense of it. You need systems which have capacities larger than sort of what a single human brain or a collective set of brains can do. That's what AI's fundamental promise was, that it can compute on sets of data that, we cannot sort of reason or rationalize with. So that is the trust. But the verification part is to ensure that only the right type of data is actually shared. Now, when you say this, what it fundamentally means is that, don't be protective about your data. Don't be too protective. Of course, you have to be protective. There are proprietary information that should remain protective, but not everything needs to be proprietary. That is a mindset to say, oh, everything that I generate inside the company is my own. It should not be that mindset. You should know what is private and what can be shared public. And use that. That's how you open up your aperture, open up your eyes to the extent of, it's almost like someone learning a new field of study and suddenly your eyes open up. This is exactly like that. So you share the right sort of data, industrial consortiums, open source movements, even the government taking a lead on this and sharing some of the data. So the more we share, more we learn, reduce the bias. And it's basically just that problem that you have data sets that are larger than what we can imagine and think, on which your model is now running and out of which you're deriving the benefit. So it's a generic answer I'm giving because there is not a very specific thing that you can sort of actually implement right off the bat, but it is, you have to connect a few dots. And there are many of those dots that lie within the organization, and people can, take those initial steps. If you don't get these steps right, you are never going to get the full benefit of what this technology can actually do for you.
And another big topic in workplaces around the world at the moment is data silos. So on that side of things, how critical is the role of the right data architecture in enabling AI to ingest more diverse perspectives? And are there any ways you could think of to help remove some of those data silos in existing systems?
Yeah, absolutely. And this has been a long journey in the world of data and databases and the data-oriented systems for a while. Historically, we always started with an application in mind, and we put the data into that format. A database keeps the data in a certain format. A search system keeps the data in a certain format. A caching system keeps the data in a certain format. An analytical system keeps the data in a certain format. They're all the bricks I was talking about. These are the silos that we end up creating. And then there are implementations of this, and then there are different brands that we use. So the proliferation just very quickly gets to a scale that is something that you cannot make sense of. So the fundamental problem then becomes that there are too many silos. And to make these, and now it's not like as though people wanted to create these silos, but that's how the technologies were. Number one. And number two, now if you want to make these silos talk to each other, it's a tremendous amount of effort where you have to create, so to say, connectors and integrations and all that stuff. And this is a lot of work. At the end of the day, you feel like you didn't get much benefit. It's almost like, playing a game of sort of soccer or football and just running sideline to sideline. There is no progress towards the goal. That's how this becomes eventually. You're running around in circles, just massaging and corralling data from one system and one vendor to another system, another vendor. That's the world we're living in one sense. And that's why we need to come out of that and have an architecture, a mindset to think that data has to be liberated. It's got to be freed up. This is where, flexible schemas and sort of schemaless systems and databases and stuff like that have come about to just enable this. People talk about data mesh and other areas where other philosophies, so to say, and models. And this is where you need to use some of these modern tools and systems to sort of liberate the data so it can move very freely between these systems, from your operational database to your analytical database, to your search systems, to your streaming queues and stuff like that. So all these have to sort of have a fundamental bulwark below them, which is about fundamentally data-free moving. The moment you achieve that, already you will start to get the benefits of some of the insights that you need to get. And the next version, next generation of it is when you sort of get the AI models to work on them and find the true insights that are deeply hidden in your organization.
And if we do dare to look towards the future, and that moment where every business is challenged with navigating towards uncharted digital waters, are there any concrete steps that enterprises could do now to maybe tackle bias in AI? And what role do you see Couchbase playing in this endeavor and helping businesses through this period?
Yeah, I think the bias bit can be sort of solved to the extent that human can solve with their own biases by sort of, just enabling the free data exchange and flow between systems and allowing then AI to work on it. And how do AI systems get better is by actually learning. And when we say learning in the area of when you look at it deep down, what really happens is that you find inferences which eventually become input for further analysis on top of it. And what is this input? More data. So it takes a set of data, synthesizes that, comes to certain conclusions. You store those and then you work. So this is how the generative piece of it, that's what you're generating, that's what you're sort of building on. And all this requires the next generation of databases to do that, allow you to do that, because the older ones have these huge limitations around how you can sort of keep adding these newer types of data. It's called, those are called schema rigidity and schema flexibility. These are a lot of deep database areas. And those are the kinds of problems we at Couchbase have solved. So the next generation of developer, what are they going to do? Current generation of developers, we say they go to Stack Overflow or some other place and cut and paste the code. And that's where the coding begins. The next generation is going to start going to some of this large language model application and say, hey, write me a new CRM application. And that's where the starting point is going to be. Oh, by the way, write this for me in Java, or choose my programming language. Oh, sorry, I wrote it in Java. It doesn't make sense to me. Please change this into JavaScript. That's how this is going to be. I mean, people have coined the term prompt engineering for this, but that's just the starting point. If anybody thinks that this is going to write the entire, CRM or a ERP application, they're dreaming. It's not going to happen. But the starting point of various, sub-modules or the various microservices that you are, then that's going to be written to compose, and the applications are going to get even more sophisticated going forward, is using these modern day tools. Nobody writes assembly code anymore. And when the C came, people used to say, it's not as efficient as the assembly code. But then a lot more people are writing C and then C++ and Java and JavaScript. That's how the language evolves at a certain level, computer sort of languages and development. With AI, it is going to change in the way you start to do this thing. And when you develop those, then, you need new types of data infrastructure. And that's where we believe Couchbase adds tremendous value to developers in this world of sort of developing AI-assisted development, which requires these schema-flexible, extremely scaling and high-performance databases, which will allow you to sort of both train your models and keep them here, as well as inference from these trained models. This is a database that is suited for both.
And I think as the speed of technological change continues to gather pace, there's also a realization that it's never going to move this slow again, especially with things like quantum computing waiting on the horizon. So another challenge, I think, is the pressure on every single one of us to be in a state of almost continuous learning. And if you don't stay up to speed, you run the risk of getting left behind. So I've got to ask, where or how do you self-educate and keep ahead of the tech trends?
No, it's a very good question. And, there is no specific go here and read upon this course will get you there. There's an element of that. But, what I can tell you is that all these tools have already made learning that much easier in one sense. So just be generally curious and look around. There is tons of information. And these sort of tools already point you in the right direction. Don't believe what they give you right off. Do your own discernment on that. But just generally be curious, because the world is changing. And you know what? This is leveling the playing field. That's how I see it. All these newer technologies are leveling the playing field for a lot of people. And so if people are just generally curious, they can learn a lot of stuff. Information is way more freely available now than, this is almost like, I forget, is it Gutenberg? What the printing press did back in the day. This is what this is doing now for the next generation. It's going to be, we are all going to be that much more smarter and intelligent, because that much more information is available to us to process. So be curious, look around, ask questions. There are multiple places where you can gather, learn, but, use your own discernment, your own judgment, to believe in only the right kind of stuff, because there is enough of hallucinating stuff sitting out there as well.
100%. Be curious. Absolutely love that. And I was chatting to somebody at a conference recently, and we were talking about creativity. And I think if we were to go back, 5 years, how creative you were and what your creative output was largely down to what expensive creative suite you've got, what software you've got. Do you know how to use all those different tools? But now I think it's almost like, as you said, it's leveling the playing field, and it's almost democratizing creativity. Yes. And that's just one area, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's where, in one sense, and how is that creativity going to express? If you ask, there are so many ways, but in the domain that I sort of think a lot more about is how the application development is going to change. Newer types of applications that we haven't yet imagined is going to come out. All because this one levels the playing field, and it makes it that much easier and simpler for you to go build. Your ideas can actually now come to a material composition which can actually derive results. And so this is going to be applicable in many areas. You can already see how music and art and stuff like that is changing, but this is going to have material impact in design, in how design automation actually works in manufacturing. This is going to have the equivalent of that, is what I understand more, which is software. How is software going to be developed and composed, and applications going to be delivered? That is dramatically changing. So the role of a developer is also dramatically changing. And the roles of databases underneath this is completely different. If you are sort of building all these new applications on some databases built in the 80s and 90s, you're setting up yourself for future failure. So those are the areas where I feel that there's going to be a lot more thinking, a lot more creative output coming out of this, newer types of applications being written, which is going to make our lives that much simpler. And the point basically is that a lot of the mundane stuff that we were all doing, the 99% perspiration that we are all into, that will sort of, much of it will sort of be taken away by machines. And of course, a new set of problems will be sort of put forth in front of us to solve. And that's how we humans have always been tool builders, and we'll build more and more tools to make our lives easier and get to, a better state.
I think that's a beautiful moment to end on. But before I do let you go, for anyone listening, just wanting to find out more information about Couchbase, the role that you play, the kind of work that you're working on, or how to contact your team, can you just remind everyone listening of where you'd like to point them?
Yes, please look out for all our stuff. And there's an amazing amount of information sitting at our website, Couchbase, www.couchbase.com. You can follow Couchbase on Twitter and also on LinkedIn. There's a lot of information that many of our engineers and others post over there. So it's a digital world, and information is coming at you pretty fast from all these places. If you want to learn more about Couchbase, these are the places I would go and subscribe to these threads there.
Well, so much I loved about our conversation today, from the need for AI to be a almost shining star of virtue, the guardians of the AI galaxy, and even enabling a constellation for AI to escape bias. It just needs to be able to connect the dots, see the bigger picture, and move away from that moving fast and breaking things mindset that we've seen over the years. But absolute pleasure to have you back on, Ravi. I'd love to get you back on towards the end of the year. Things are moving so quickly at the moment. It'd be interesting to see how things are evolving, but a big thank you as always.
Thank you so much, Neil. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
So a huge thank you to Ravi for joining me, who we can officially declare now as friend of the show. So I can't thank him enough for sharing his insights around the critical aspect of AI, bias. And it was great hearing about his perspective honed through his work at Couchbase, and for shedding light on the impact of AI bias on enterprises, and the importance of creating guardians for AI, and the need for AI to have a broader, more diverse perspectives to overcome bias. And as the AI space race of sorts accelerates, I think it's clear that tackling bias is not just a nice to have, but it's an essential task for enterprises. We've seen what happens before when you move fast and break things without considering the future implications of any tech implementation across a business. And I hope today's discussion has provided you with a few actionable insights on how to approach this challenge. But hey, this was a 30-minute podcast today, and it is a huge topic. And I don't have the answers, and Ravi don't have the answers. Together we don't have the answers. But that's why I want to bring everybody listening into this conversation. As Ravi said, curiosity plays a big role in this, but equally, so does collaboration. And on that side of things, I invite you all to email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, if you want to come on here and share the stage. If you'd like to record a quick audio message, maybe on WhatsApp or LinkedIn or whatever platform you use, hold down that record button. Say, hey Neil, I listened to the show today. These are my thoughts. If you think we missed anything, let me know. I'd love to play it on a future episode and maybe continue this conversation that Ravi started today. And I think it is something we're going to be talking about a lot in the months and years ahead. So remember, email me, message me, audio message me, whatever it is, to techblogwriter@outlook.com. Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just @NeilC.Hughes. But that's it for today, I'm afraid. So stay curious, continue to explore this fascinating world of technology, and I cordially invite you to join me again tomorrow. But thank you for listening today, and until next time, don't be a stranger.